Larson was a tailor. He was a member of a tailors guild back in the 19th century, late 19th century, and many people believe he was also a Freemason. Well, in these papers, there are a couple of rune rows, and in one of those rune rows that it says right above the rune row in Swedish, these are the ancient runes written in the secret style. And the very first rune above the letter A is the hooked X. And this was really an amazing discovery. And of course, you know, the opponents jumped on this, and because some of the other mysterious runes that hadn't been seen by many investigators in the past were present in this rune row, they said, aha, maybe a late 19th century immigrant who came over to the United States could have known about this alphabet and carved the runestone. Well, that's an interesting hypothesis. The problem is that the dotted R does not appear there. So that pretty much took the wind out of that. And of course, it was a knee-jerk reaction without fully studying these rune rows. Now, there's another thing that occurs in the Larson papers, and that's a Masonic box code, which is where the speculation that he might have been a Freemason came from. Well, what's interesting is the same Masonic box code is found in, at least going back to the 15th century, in Cistercian manuscripts. And the Cistercians were the medieval order that founded the Knights Templar, who were well known for using codes and ciphers and symbols as well, and certainly were associated with the Cistercians. In essence, they were one and the same. They followed the same order, and they were founded by Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, who was the leader of the Cistercians in its early days. So we have an interesting connection here with the Cistercians, the Templars, and apparently Freemasonry. Now, the other example of the hooked X, or one of the other examples of the hooked X that was found in Europe is, interestingly enough, was found in the sigla of an important historical figure that started using the hooked X in his sigla after he came back from the New World that first time. And that man is Christopher Columbus. So I think one of your other guests is going to talk about this connection later today, Dr. Manuel da Silva. And I think the bottom line is that Mr. Columbus is not who we thought he was. I believe he was a member of the Knights of Christ, which was an order the Knights Templar changed their name to in Portugal after the put-down of the order in 1307. I think he had a map. I think he knew exactly where he was going. And I think the hooked X is one of the pieces of evidence that is consistent with that, to say nothing of the Knights of Christ cross that was on the sails of his ships. So anyway, that's a whole other avenue of investigation. But the final place that we found the hooked X, and I'm going to give my wife, Janet, full credit for this because she found this symbol in a book a couple years ago, or it'll be a couple years ago this Christmas. And since we found this symbol associated with the Cistercians and the Knights Templar, of course, we started to think about structures that were built by the Templars and the Cistercians. And amazingly enough, Janet found the hooked X symbol. She found it carved on a pillar inside a very famous church in Scotland called Roslin Chapel.
I've heard of that church.
Yes, you have. So that was, I have to say, you know, it was incredible because of all the thousands of churches and cathedrals and abbeys and castles that were built by this order over a period of just over 200 years, of all the religious structures, to find it in Roslin. Now, it may exist in some other places. We don't know. But, boy, that goes beyond coincidence for me.
You also found the symbol on an astrolabe. Can you explain, first, what an astrolabe is, and second, how you guys came to find it there?
Yes. Well, an astrolabe is a medieval instrument that was used for calculating latitude. It was also used for measuring angles, both vertically and horizontally, and probably used for some other things. I'm not fully versed in the use of an astrolabe, but on the Spirit Pond mapstone, on the back side, opposite the map, there are some runes. There are some figures carved on the back, a fish, a deer, a duck, an eel, a native face, a person in a canoe, a bow and arrow, a skin, and then something that looks like a ladder, and then an interesting X symbol that at first I thought might be another hooked X, but it's in fact something called an arced X. And I don't have time to take you through the whole story, but due solely to the discovery of a book by a local researcher in Minneapolis here, a guy by the name of Michael Zalar. He brought a book to my attention that had the X symbol used for A. In addition to that, it also had a bunch of other interesting stuff, including that 15th century Cistercian Masonic box code. But it also had a picture of a plate from an astrolabe with that arced X symbol on it, the same one that's found on the Spirit Pond mapstone. I subsequently studied and looked at very carefully about 600 instruments, astrolabes, and the only one I could find that had that symbol on it was this one astrolabe that's found at the Oxford Museum of the History of Science in London, or outside London. And I went over to see that instrument, and it turns out that instrument dates back to 1350 to 1400. Now, there's some new research that I've been made aware of that they actually date it now. They think it might go back to 1260, but that's fine. That's an amazing connection to the astrolabe and to that Spirit Pond mapstone. And that ladder symbol turns out is a pentatic number of 44. And then my wife and I put it together that this might be a symbol for latitude, and that in fact these symbols and that map might say where this place is. So then we went out and got an atlas, and sure enough, at pretty close to 44 degrees is where Spirit Pond is. And the fact that only one instrument in the world has this arced X symbol, to me, is there's no way a forger would know that. And to me, it's analogous to the dotted R on the Kensington runestone. This is absolutely a genuine medieval artifact, the Spirit Pond mapstone, and since the other two stones were found together with it, they must be genuine too. So, yeah, that was pretty cool.
So we have a stone dated to 1362. We have symbols on it that tied back to Gotland, where the only people that make sense to have carved this were the Cistercians. What were the Cistercians up to in Gotland in 1362? Give us some context there. What was going on?